A covered plate was sitting in Hasan al-Basri's kitchen. Steam was still rising from it. He had already heard what was being said about him across the city, and yet his hands were moving. Not to write a reply, not to find the man, but to arrange food on that plate. Someone had come to his door earlier that morning. A neighbor, or perhaps a student. It is not recorded exactly who. What is recorded is the message they carried. A man in the city had been speaking badly of Hasan, publicly, repeatedly, to anyone who would listen. Hasan listened to the whole account. He did not interrupt. He did not ask who else had heard. When the person finished speaking, Hasan said very little. Then he walked back into the kitchen, and he began to cook. The food he made was not small or careless. He chose dates and bread and something warm from the pot. He arranged each item with attention, the way a person arranges a gift, not a meal. He covered the plate carefully so nothing would cool on the walk across the city. No one in his household appears to have questioned him, or if they did, it is not part of what survived. What survived is only the action itself, the cooking, the covering, the carrying, the bare bones of what he chose to do instead of what most people would have done. Basra was a large city. It had markets, scholars, merchants, and lanes that turned and crossed without warning. Walking across part of it with a covered plate of food was not a small errand. It took time. It required intention. You had to mean it to do it. Hasan was already an old man by the time most of these accounts were recorded. His hair was white. He had lived in Basra for most of his life. He had studied and taught and sat in circles of discussion for decades. People came from far away to hear him speak. He was not a man without reputation. That is the point. He had something to protect. When someone spoke badly of him, it was not a small stone thrown at a nobody. It was a stone thrown at a name that people already knew and already respected across that city. And still, he cooked. And still, he covered the plate. And still, he walked. None of the accounts suggest he was calm because he did not feel it. They suggest he was calm because he had decided something, before his feet even moved, about what kind of answer he would give. He reached the man's house. We do not know the man's name. We know only that he was someone in the city who had chosen to speak, and that he had not expected this particular visitor to arrive at his door carrying food. Hasan knocked, or called out. The manner of arrival is not specified. What is specified is that the door opened, and the man who had been spreading the slander found himself face to face with the person he had been talking about. That moment must have been very still. Hasan held out the plate. He did not raise his voice. He did not list what had been said about him or ask the man to confirm it. He simply extended the covered plate toward the man at the door, the way you extend a thing you have brought for someone. There was also a note, a small piece of paper tucked beneath the cloth or placed on top. The accounts differ on exactly where, but the note was there. Hasan had written something before he left his house, and he had brought it with him, along with the food. The note said, and this is what survived, that Hasan had heard the man had been giving him a gift. The gift, Hasan wrote, was the man's good deeds. When a person slanders another, The account goes, the good deeds of the one speaking pass to the one being spoken about. So Hasan's note was a thank you, not a sarcastic one, not a performance of patience meant to embarrass the other man, a genuine accounting. You have been sending me something of value, and I want you to know I received it, and I am grateful, and here is something in return. The food was the return gift. That is the structure of the whole act. He received something, the good deeds transferred through slander, and he sent something back. Bread, dates, something warm, a complete exchange, conducted entirely without anger or argument. We do not know what the man at the door said when he received all of this. We do not know if he was ashamed or confused, or if he laughed, or if he cried. The account does not record his reaction. It records only what Hasan brought and what the note contained. Hasan walked home. The plate was empty now, or left behind. His hands were free. The city around him was moving into evening, cooking fires, call to prayer, animals being settled for the night, merchants closing their stalls. He moved through all of it. There is no account of him telling the story himself. It was told by others, people who knew him, or who heard it from people who knew him. That too is part of the record. He did not come home and describe what he had done. He simply did it and came home. The person who told him about the slander that morning, they would have waited perhaps to see what Hasan would do. Or perhaps they assumed he would do nothing, that he would absorb it the way old men absorb insults, quietly and without recourse. They were half right. He did it quietly, but he did not do nothing. That is the exact distance between what people expected and what actually happened. And that distance, that small, specific gap between silence and a covered plate of food, is the entire weight of what this account carries. He did not defend himself, not once, not in the moment he heard the news, not during the walk across the city, not at the door. He never said, "What I actually said was," or "You misunderstood me," or "Let me explain." None of that. Only the plate, only the note. Think about the group chat, the one you are not in, but you know exists, the one where your name comes up and you are not there to correct anything, to add context, to say, that is not the full story. You find out later, or sometimes you never find out at all. That is the same city. That is the same lane. Think about being talked about at work. The version of you that circulates in rooms you are not in. That version is always slightly wrong, slightly flattened, built from things taken out of order. And the instinct, the very strong, very human instinct, is to go correct it, to find the room, to explain. Hasan did not go to correct it. He went to deliver something. That is not passivity. Passivity is staying home and saying nothing and feeling it quietly rot inside you. What he did was an action, a full, deliberate, effortful action. He cooked, he walked, he knocked, he handed it over. Not defending yourself is not the same as losing. That is the core of it. The heaviest reply available to you is a thank you, not silence, not retreat. A thank you, delivered with both hands to the person who has been speaking about you. That is the weight Hasan carried across that city. He understood something that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. The person talking about you is not your problem to solve. Your response to it, What you cook, what you carry, what you choose to send back, that is the only part that belongs to you. Hasan al-Basri lived in Basra for most of his long life. He taught, he sat in circles, he answered questions, he was quiet when he chose to be quiet. He died in the year 110 of the Hijri calendar, which is roughly 728 of the Common Era. He was in his 80s. What he left behind was not a book. It was accounts, small, specific moments that people remembered and repeated. This one survived because it was exact enough to hold its shape across 1,000 years. A covered plate, a note, a walk across a city, a knock.